The revolution was televised, but it didn't do too well. The first episode got around 13,000 viewers, and the numbers went down from there. By the time they got to the end of the first series, it was pretty obvious where it was going. The critics were lukewarm, for starters. They mostly expressed initial sympathy for the premise, but found a lot of the characters unlikable, and in some cases outright problematic. The right-leaning press, of course, didn't like the whole idea and complained more about how implausible it was that a united and militant working class could take over and run basic industry like electricity production and education. They didn't like the leader of the teachers' union, for example, a woman who reminded them too much of a prominent politician that was the usual bugbear for most pundits in the Murdoch press. The less restrained blogs had their usual field day just abusing her and other prominent characters for being female and not white, and the comment section, as usual, degenerated into such outright misogyny, racism and general militant stupidity that even some of the editors of the biggest websites began to feel the need to put out a token statement about how they deplore bigotry of any kind, blah 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 blah. As for the left, it was the usual set of complaints. Not enough trans women of colour in prominent roles, many of these characters having tweeted something slightly sus 10 years ago. Why are there Israeli activists involved when everyone knows Zionists are Nazis? On and on it went. And on went the social media shitstorm where everyone accused everyone else of being a fascist. In the end, half the left cancelled the other half off the face of the earth, which set them quite back for a while there. But the general public found the whole thing confusing. What were they expected to believe? That it was possible to collectively run workplaces and communities? Most people didn't want the bother. They had too much to do already. Getting their KPIs finished, getting the kids to and from school, trying to get mum into a decent nursing home, organising who was going to have Christmas this year, renegotiating the mortgage with the bank, paying off the credit cards, going to the doctors for a checkup on last month's operation, arguing with their internet service provider, getting the dog its last parvo shots, remembering to send flowers to the cousin to congratulate her on the baby, trying to get the eldest daughter to at least consider talking to a psychologist, finding a tradie good and cheap enough to get a quote for the extension, motivating themselves to actually use the gym membership. Who the hell wanted to sit in endless meetings discussing if the empty lots down the street could be made into a collective nursery, let alone have the time for it? The whole premise just struck too many viewers as ridiculous. Those involved in the revolution itself, for their part, didn't notice much of this, since they were too busy getting shot up by the cops and the army, getting rounded up and dragged to prisons, being tortured, raped and murdered, and generally being crushed into nothing by the sheer power of the naked force of the state. What collectives, syndicates and other revolutionary organisations existed were disbanded. Property was returned to bosses. Workers were told to shut up and put up with massive pay cuts, conditions out the window, work hours either cut to nothing or extended to infinity. And as for those indigenous groups that also took the occasion to rise up and reclaim land from colonisers, a great many of them were just genocided into obscurity. Even societies that didn't take part were wiped out as governments took advantage of the chaos to fully annihilate those indigenous peoples they had always hated and wanted to destroy. And so the station abandoned the plans for a second series and decided to go back to copying a reality show involving throwing attractive teenagers into a pool of sharks and see who survives, which did moderately well on the ratings and made a celebrity of the host who the station could cash in on and get to host award ceremonies and bullshit like that. Allegedly, everybody lived happily ever after.